certainly a great pleasure for me to be here today and presenting what is ongoing research right now to the point that this presentation is not quite as glossy or not quite as contained as I would like, but I think I can make do. This is somewhat different. It was very refreshing to listen to Wall's talk on the electric universe, and I guess I played a role, somewhat of a role in establishing what is called the plasma universe, which is about the same thing. Very refreshing to see that. It's a field that I worked in for, gosh, 2.5 decades or so, and right now I'm working in something very closely related, but it's different. It's petroglyphs. Okay, it's not galaxies, rotation magnetic fields in galaxies, which we produced, which is on our websites or in any number of publications. But it's carvings on rock by man in prehistory. Now, why are these important? This is a picture that I took on the Navajo reservation, and which is absolutely typical of petroglyphs that one will find around the world. As I'm going to show, petroglyphs have a definite orientation. They also change in morphology and shape depending on the latitude that they're found on Earth. And this is typically, this is at about 36 degrees latitude north, so it's lower than the United Kingdom. But perfectly typical around the Earth, and the duck-shaped heads appear everywhere as well as these other symbols, and I'm going to go into why. My first introduction to petroglyphs was by David Talbot. I went to a meeting of his by accident and learned something about what they were doing, and then he showed me some pictures, and I looked at the pictures, and I said, "Where did you get these pictures?" Because I had never seen them outside of an unclassified environment, to tell you the truth. And they're on rocks. They're on rocks. Where are these rocks stored? What vault? It's got these rocks. And I was kind of, what am I going to do now? And he said, "Oh no, they're all over. They're petroglyphs. They're all over the place." And I was stunned, having worked in what's called high energy density plasmas, high energy density in nuclear physics. I was stunned that these pictures, apparently thousands of years old, preceded what we'd only been recording for about 2 years with our new facilities. It cost a lot of money. Okay. This is a typical petroglyph panel in Arizona. Again, it is typical at a large number of latitudes found around the world. To most people looking at this, these are abstract designs, abstract by the ancients that may have been, maybe did not have full control of their facilities, whatever, to draw things like this. In fact, I'm going to show you that these are very, very accurate replications of what was seen in the ancient sky. Art locations, rock art. It's often called rock art. And actually, rock art is a good name. These are typical locations, the well-known locations around the world. In fact, petroglyphs are found on virtually any granite or basalt surface, or any good rock palette that has certain characteristics with regards to orientation. And you could almost fill in the entire picture black where there are mountains, where there are rocks. There are a lot of petroglyphs. They exist by the hundreds of millions. Let me start out by talking about the Earth's aurora, which is caused by Birkeland currents. Here's a view of the Aurora Borealis, the northern aurora. There's a southern aurora, Aurora Australis, that don't occur at the same time. And this is seen in ultraviolet light by the Viking satellite. And here's an artist's depiction. I got this from Johns Hopkins Applied Research Laboratory, which sends rockets up to photograph this. And it shows the incoming and outgoing Birkeland currents that originate with any kind of plasma that happens to enter the solar system or with an intense solar burst. You've got this plasma interacting with the Earth's dipole magnetic field, and at the north magnetic pole and south magnetic pole, those are called horns, and there's holes. The magnetic field comes in, and the plasma, the charged particles, the electrons and ions, are able to pour in, and they follow this cone shape and to produce the aurora that we see. And this is the kind of aurora that we have today. Many astronomers, physicists have hypothesized that at one time there was an immense solar outburst from the sun, maybe 100,000 times what it is right now. Tommy Gold was one of the first to suggest this hypothesis, which he printed in actually in a Vatican paper of all places. And it has been followed up by other people. So many physicists, many astronomers believe that in the past, millennia ago, there was an intense solar outburst, and so I'm going to pursue that. Now, the first thing I have to do is to teach you plasma physics. Okay, which is okay. This is the Achilles heel. Whenever one has a column of plasma, a straight column of plasma, it tends to pinch itself, and it is. See, on our side of the Atlantic, it's called a Z pinch. Here, it's called a Z pinch. And it's one of the most common occurrences in space plasma, in that you've got a current flowing in a direction, and a current flowing in a direction tends to produce its own self-magnetic field, which tends to periodically pinch in on the plasma. And this is the basic concept for many fusion concepts. The Z machine at San Diego National Laboratories, for example, or the earlier machines at Princeton and Los Alamos and so on. So what I'm trying to get across here is one will get these pinches. In the laboratory, we use a number of ways to produce these pinches with megajoules of energies. We'll either use wires to totally strip and vaporize into a plasma Z pinch, or inject a gas, which will be fully ionized into a plasma column or Z pinch, or a very thin cylinder. And in all cases, the pinch is pinched. Experimentalists will say, and I've taken pictures of these myself, between 8 and 10. It's usually 9. 9 is the number of these bulges, which we call plasmoids, and they will contain their own circling current inside, which again produces a dipole field. Okay, so that's almost all you need to know about plasma physics. Have I forgotten anything? No, I don't think so.
Excuse me, how big is this column?
Experimentally, we have followed it over 14 orders of magnitude in size. That includes the sun down to centimeters in the laboratory. The Nobel laureate Hannes Alpine claimed that it scaled 28 orders of magnitude out to the Hubble distance. Okay, and it's been our experience. It doesn't matter if you have microamperes of current or 150 gigaamperes of current. Acts the same. Nine's the number. And again, size. It can be astrophysical or millimeters. Okay. Now, there's a couple of other things. I have not finished teaching you plasma physics yet, and so now I'm going to try and do so in about 30 seconds. The Nobel laureates Chandrasekhar and Enrico Fermi were the first to to solve the what was called the stability condition of a Z-pinch. Here's the 9 plasmoids. Actually, I've only drawn 5 or so here, and very complicated mathematical papers. Other people followed up. I think we were the first to actually graphically present graphical representations of the instabilities in a 1981 Physical Review Letters paper. And this is a sort of morphology, and these are sort of the magnetic field lines and that one gets in a configuration like this. And we're going to look at this in some detail with regards to petroglyphs. As the current increases, as you increase the current, the pinches get larger and larger until these are actually pinched off, and what you get are a stack of toroids. This is an experimental picture of the stack of toroids. This is the conceptual view of what we have, the 9 toroids. And again, this occurs at any scale, or at least from 14 orders of magnitude proven, and 28 orders of magnitude hypothesized. And what is an order of magnitude? Order of magnitude is 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 14 times. Okay. And current pulses, the current flowing through one of these plasma columns tends to be sporadic, like all currents in space. And this causes different parts of the column as the pulse comes through. And in our case, we're using 1 nanosecond pulse. And it's like, what units do you use here? Do you are you metric? Yes. Metric, or are you metric or English? Okay. We use God's units. Light travels in 1 nanosecond. Light travels 1 king's foot length. Okay. So I'm going to give it to you in feet and inches, like that, dollars. Okay. So the important thing is different things are going to be lit up whenever one sees a Z-pinch, and again, this can be any size. And the size that I'm leading to is the size of that intense auroral funnel that millennia ago came into Earth. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the so-called eye or owl morphology in that Z-pinch. It looks something like this when you false color it and fill it in, and then compare it to what we call eye mask petroglyphs around the world. This is Easter Island, New Grange. Where else? This is in California. This is actually a pictograph of the Chumash Indians. This is on the Columbia River Basin, which is very rich in eye mask, as is British Columbia. It's Romania, Europe. Everywhere you find this classification of petroglyph. Okay, so that's one classification of petroglyph on that rock that had everything. Okay, and if I blow this up, and again, this is a computer simulation, and then I start comparing it. This is a pictograph on Thera Island in Greece. The date is unknown. Again, I generated this picture circa 1981. This might be 1,800 years old or 2,000, or I don't know. I don't have a date on this, but I think one can possibly see the similarity between the two, and in fact, there's many more. You find these everywhere around the world. Here's as opposed to the eye mask, these are the so-called face mask petroglyphs, and the ones I've shown here are from Greece, Africa, Australia, Venezuela, British Columbia, New Grange, giving it all sorts of names. Okay, Oregon, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colombia. Actually, I have many thousands of these, and they are from around the world. This is the mathematical solution of the Chandrasekhar Fermi equations as the pulse comes through, and one can look at the face masks and then compare, what somebody might see, and it depends on culture, of course, how they interpreted it. But anyway, it is a very popular petroglyph worldwide.
Are you saying that they're seeing a magnetic field?
Excuse me?
Are you saying that they're seeing the magnetic field?
What they're seeing really is electrons in the presence of a magnetic field. Electrons in the presence of a magnetic field. If the electrons are relativistic, produce synchrotron light, and what they were seeing was synchrotron light, and of course man has been seeing synchrotron light from Crab Nebula and so on for as long as man has been on Earth, so it's always been there, and I'll show you a very bright synchrotron light. So that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at the magnetic field per se. Okay, and this is an experimental view cross-section of this conceptual geometry, and these are this has actually got nine pairs. The most intense synchrotron radiation coming out where the plasma is most intense, which is at the edge of these donuts, as shown in this picture here, and then lesser numbers here. And again, this is found worldwide. The ladder and scorpion petroglyphs, again, they're all over. Ireland has got a lot. Every place has got a lot of these so-called ladder petroglyphs, and also the so-called scorpion petroglyphs are found all over. And what happens is that these donuts, as the current increases, the donuts, the toroids in the column tend to flatten out, and then they start to warp as the current increases. So these original donuts now have flattened out. This one has remained the same, so it still has these eye-like features that one sees here in the petroglyph. This is from Kayenta on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. Some start to warp. In fact, they're all going to start to warp at some point as the current increases. And right now, as I recall on this one, we're up to something like 14 megaamperes or so, headed up towards 25 megaamperes on a very large pulse power generator. And at the top, they start forming a flower-like structure where sort of a bulb-like feature is forming, and then the next one is going to close around, and the next one's going to close around, and then in this direction it's going to go. It's going to close around in this direction. This is a radiograph. This is a radiograph 2. This is not cut off artificially. This is really the way it is. That's really the way it is of the ladder. Somebody complained about the quality of this radiograph. A radiograph is not a photograph. It is taken by means of a flash X-ray radiograph generator, which is very large, maybe of the order of 100 meters long or so. It costs $140,000 US to get a picture like this, which is done in a fraction of a nanosecond or in picoseconds. And we put many of these. And it has to be. We're looking through different layers of metals, steel and copper, other heavy metals, and it has to be extracted. The picture has to be extracted, and that's why it's so expensive. So it's not a photograph, but it still gives you an idea of what is actually happening inside this chamber. And of course, the X-rays produced are lethal, and so everything is covered in lead, and people are kept a mile away, and so on. And a lot of these are done half a mile downhole at the Nevada test site with drifts going out to keep people safe. As the current continues to increase, it produces these mushroom sort of features. Here is an experimental mushroom sort of feature. Here is the same thing, so shown side on and then slightly upward. And then one can find the equivalent in petroglyphs, these same morphologies. And here I've shown a few, but they're, again, I guess at least by the tens of thousands, probably millions, and everywhere. Well, not quite everywhere. At high latitudes, they're often not found. The mirror image or stick figure. Now, this is one of the most popular images that one finds in petroglyphs. And Wall mentioned briefly on this also as being the thunderbolts of the god. This is just one Z-pinch radiograph where one can sort of see this. This is just one, and we have to look at many before we can put together the conceptual image. This is conceptual image obliquely, conceptual image side on, and then these are the dense parts. These are the dense parts of the Z-pinch radiograph, and this, without the dots, is the most common petroglyph one finds around the world. It's called a stick figure or a mirror image. Rarer yet, but quite informative to me, are these stick figures that have two dots on the side, because that's what we see in the laboratory. And again, this is in light emission, light being bright along these points here, and many cultures here have these. This again is from the conceptual, from the experiment, from the radiograph. Navajo. Now I've picked out the double dots because it would be, you know, how do you explain something that looks like this? Well, you can say, well, they weren't very bright and their drawing capacities were very limited. But around the world, they all did it the same way. But if you look for every, between 100 and 500 of the regular stick figure images, you see the one with the double dots. And here I've picked out those from the Navajo Reservation, Armenia, Guyana, an area that we're surveying right now. Here's the one I found in New Mexico that is not 5 miles from my house. One in Spain. Here's one in China. This one is in Val Camonica in Italy, United Arab Emirates. Another one from Val Camonica, and this is another one I discovered in the southern part of Arizona, near Tucson. But again, you find these by great numbers, but they are rarer. So now what I'm trying to convey to you is that panel that looked totally incoherent or looked like mad people, maybe eating the local cactus or whatever, drew. Of course, maybe they had the same cactus around the world, which I doubt, because they all drew the same thing around the world. So I'm trying to start to pick out the different pictures that they drew on this rock, and it's completely overdrawn, and I'll show you why it's overdrawn. This is in Africa, a Dogon ceremony, which is carried on to today. The Aboriginal peoples are very, very good, actually, as are we, in preserving what is sacrosanct as being sacrosanct. You do not change the shape of it. If you have a cross, you don't suddenly decide to change the shape of a cross into something else. You keep it the way it's been handed down to you. And here you can see in their ceremonies, and this is today, the stick figures. This is called a Ciggy Headdress. And one can, I think there's probably 9 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9. Okay. And it's got the, again, this might be visualized as eyes up here in the crossing. There was an X crossing here, which, and I don't know if I'm going to show you those figures, but anyway, there's these figures that show up So they continue to hand down these icons with very little change. He's dancing around, and same sort of dance that's done by the powwow in Albuquerque, which is about 2 hours from my house, the All Nations powwow, Indian powwow, and they dance around usually with eagle's feather in a certain way, and I'm going to show you why it's done like that. One cannot talk about Petroglyphs. Has everybody heard of Kokopelli? No. Has anybody heard of Kokopelli? Okay. Okay. Walzer to Kokopelli. Okay. Kokopelli is a very popular folk figure in places like New Mexico, Arizona, the southwestern United States. Also in places like Afghanistan and other places around the world. He's generally considered a mischievous Africa, a mischievous sort of figure playing a flute. And it may be a flute, it may be something else. It depends on how the culture interpreted what they saw in the synchrotron light in the very bright aurora coming into the sky. Here's the plasma images of the flute playing figure, and this is from the American Southwest here, many different styles. Again, playing the flute, Southwest. This is Africa playing the flute. Colombia, well, that might be a flute, I don't know. This again, this is from the Southwest because there's a duck head which often appears. This is in Russia. Siberia is very rich in petroglyphs, and Sri Lanka, something similar interpreted by their culture. Okay, moving right on because I've got to move right on. A very popular petroglyph that one finds is that of a bighorn sheep in the Southwest. Well, not just in the Southwest, American Southwest, but in many different places. I've taken these from California, and but you find them in other parts of the world too. And what happens when you have this intense aurora coming in, interacting with the atmosphere, a series of instabilities develop that are not sequence instabilities, but instabilities associated with the shock of the atmosphere, and it produces these sort of figures. And prehistoric man, I mean, you can easily imagine. I mean, what can you relate this to? Well, you can relate this to a bighorn sheep, which is what they did. They also draw them in a way. They knew perfectly well the anatomy of what a bighorn sheep and what it looked like because they had them hanging in camp. That was one of their prime sources of food. They knew very well. That's not the way they drew them. They drew them like the plasma instabilities. Very close, but that's not quite the way they drew them. This is the country, the kind of country that we work with in logging petroglyphs. This is again an instability that develops once the donut has flattened out. It flattens out in waves, and then it starts curling in. Petroglyphs are oriented around the world. They are oriented, and they are oriented magnetic. This is a magnetic south needle. It's oriented magnetic south. This magnetic south is right behind this edge, and I call that a knife edge or a blinder because the center of the plasma column was coming in magnetic south right into the south magnetic full, synchrotron radiation, very bright, and almost every petroglyph has got a blinder of some sort in front of it, something that shields out the center so you can see what's happening on the outside where the instabilities are, and the instabilities are on the outside. So at this location I'm actually back in a cave, and the petroglyphs are back in the cave here. This is looking south, and it's got this is a typical feature. Here the same thing. Magnetic south is this way. It not only has the mountain, off to the distance, about 90 miles or how many kilometers that is. But it has this knife edge, and this whole area here is filled with petroglyphs. As soon as you go around the bend, no petroglyphs. Same rocks, no petroglyphs whatsoever. Then they are oriented magnetic south. So we know which direction the intense aurora came in. This is an escarpment of some 7,500 petroglyphs, which I surveyed in, this is below Santa Fe, New Mexico. And see, this is a marker line that I used with my GPS unit as a calibrator on the road that exists. And the different colors are different sweeps that I made through this area. This is an escarpment here, about 100 feet high or so. And what is important, magnetic south is here, and you find petroglyphs whenever there was a view of towards magnetic south, but kind of shielded. Here's magnetic south and kind of shielded by the escarpment. And where it turns, now these rocks are exactly the same as these rocks, exactly the same as these rocks. You found a few concentrics and a few spirals, which are the highest part of the configuration here, but this is absolutely void of petroglyphs. Where these are overdrawn, they may be overdrawn 3 times down here. And now a mountain range gets in the way down here, and it stops. So you lose that magnetic south. This is a petrified forest in Arizona. This is a topograph with the logging points of petroglyphs on it, and this is a 3-dimensional view. And the marks are, of course, petroglyph magnetic south. This is going off in this direction. I think it's about 11 degrees at this latitude and location. And then they stop. There are a few up here, few here, and what happens is there's a mountain range to the south that blocks out the view. And in fact, these will trace, they will actually silhouette the mountain off to the south. But this mountain range then blocks it off, and even though these rocks are just as good as here, there are no petroglyphs because of that blockage. This is petroglyph site in Donner Pass, Sierra Nevada, California. Great historical interest to those who study the high Sierras. And the petroglyphs are located so that it has this is the blue line is magnetic south. And even those, when you're there, it's very hard to tell in the field that there is a preference whatsoever, because the mountains are so high. They're 14,000 feet. Divide by pi, and you'll get meters, I guess. Standing here and looking at the petroglyphs, you really cannot tell that there's a gap until you put it down on a 3-dimensional aerial or a 3-dimensional topograph, time after time. And it's magnetic south. Here's the same thing. Here's a site in southern Arizona. This is near Tucson. The Kokopelli, famous Kokopelli Axis Mundi petroglyph, which is again the flattened donuts coming around like this, a very beautiful figure. These are the ones I've logged, and at the time I was logging, there was this big mountain here. Couldn't tell. And then I found some over on a rock over here, but when I put it down on a 3D aerial, it is immediately apparent this is magnetic south. That again, they're looking magnetic south. And of course, we have, I don't know, 300 or 400 of these like this right now. Actually, more data, but this is a very difficult site to get to. These, it's an aerial map, but it's contoured at 20 feet contours. So it looks nice and smooth. Well, I went in with Professor Marvin Rowe, who is, I believe, probably the world's expert on dating pictographs. We made our way in there. It took us all day and all day to get out. Very, very rough country. But if you move a foot in some places, the difference is 400 feet down. So, and again, there's a channel down here. There's a channel down here, which we could see at the site. This is a 10-kilometer long canyon. This is the Rio Grande River. This is in New Mexico. This is an area that I've explored pretty extensively. These petroglyphs that go along here go along silhouette the mountains in front, directly magnetic south to them. And there's about three. One little place up here in this canyon that has a magnetic south view. You find some petroglyphs. Let me show you. This is very precipitous. That's what it looks like, really. Waterfall here, and I'm going to show you where the petroglyphs are in a minute, but one has to come down on the side here and snake around and come down, and it's very, very difficult, very dangerous country to traverse. This is looking down towards the Rio Grande, and it turns out the petroglyphs are right in here where it can look off magnetic south. Look off magnetic south with no interruption by mountains here or mountains over here. It's got a very narrow magnetic south field of view. Probably see part of the trail going down here. That's the Rio Grande, which means big river. It's about that wide. Okay. This is a map of the Alpine rock art sites. The sites that I have most recently logged include it's supposedly the largest petroglyph site in Europe, and this is at the Camonica Valley in Italy. Bergamo's over here, Milano's somewhere, here, and. As I said, there's about 300,000 there, and of course we didn't individually log them all, but we logged the rocks that they're on, and then put them on maps. Now, what surprised me was when I was at Valcamonica, it appeared again the mountains on either side went up 9,000–10,000 feet, and you have this very narrow valley as you're looking down towards the Mediterranean. And it looked to me like they were looking directly magnetic south. But when I put this on a 3D contour, they're doing the same thing that they do in Arizona, New Mexico, or elsewhere, is they're tending to put them where they have some sort of blinder, some sort of shield. These are actually down a little bit, so the rock has got all kinds of inscriptions, but there's a little bit of a blind. Same thing here. They're following the contours to block out that intense synchrotron light that is coming in from directly magnetic south. Here's magnetic south. This one right here is way off to the side, but there's a cut in the valley here that allows it to look magnetic south. Area that right now I've got a great deal of data. The Dutch in Suriname, I suppose, having nothing better to do, and being the Dutch as they are, there's a lot of petroglyphs there on the river, so they put latitudes and longitudes on them instead of people collect butterflies, and they did this. So it's a great deal of data, valuable data for me that probably has been overlooked by everybody else, or not considered valuable by anybody else, I should say. And that includes French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, part of Venezuela. I've been down part of this, but I have not been in here. But and what have I left out? Well, anyway, this is in Suriname. This is a boulder, and it's a big boulder, and it's filled with petroglyphs, and it has a nice view right down this channel. This natural channel in the land, magnetic south, and you have to go quite a ways before you find more petroglyphs. Here's another place. Again, this is a rock out, and it's out in the river, and it has a field of view that is magnetic south. Now many petroglyphs have a total field of view. You can look in all directions, but if the magnetic south is not there, there's no petroglyphs. This is another point, again, where the anomaly of the river allows a straight magnetic south view. This is, again, in Suriname. And now we go to a little island close to Borneo, I think. And I really have to thank my Australian friends who load up my emails by sending me tons of data. And right now, the area in South Australia, I'm getting a lot of data from sites in here, up here in the Kimberleys, the Windjana Gorge. I'm getting data, and there's a lady that is actually traveling somewhere here, and taking logging information and contributing it. All very valuable data. This is Akaru Rock. And again, we have the same thing. Petroglyphs over here, there's a shield, there's a knife-edge shield, a blinder here, and there's magnetic south. This is Sacred Canyon, and again we have the same thing. Now there is an opening to the east, and we have some question, are they looking partially east? And it depends on the inclination that you look up the column, what instability you see. And so we're logging that data, but again we have the magnetic south field of view. This is the Urambala Caves. Same thing. These are in caves back in here. There's a shield, and about the only field of view would be something like this, and here's magnetic south. And we're trying to get data at Tasmania, for example. This is at something like 33 degrees or so, and Tasmania gets down to 40 degrees, and we'd like to get some petroglyphs there, as well as from a few other parts of the world that have very large southerly latitudes, as well as determine what is the maximum northerly latitude. This is Mount Chambers Petroglyph Galley, particularly fine example of the petroglyphs here, and again only having, there's no view, there's no north view, there's no east view, there's no west view, there's only a magnetic south view here. Okay, concentric and spiral petroglyphs mapping and incoming aurora. Okay, I don't know if I mentioned this. I probably didn't mention this. When you have a thin plasma column, the tendency for the thin plasma column is to filament into 56 individual currents. We call them 56 Birkeland currents. And again, the number is 56, regardless of the current or the size. And when you look at, now when you watch the time evolution of once the cylinder has filamented up, I'll show some pictures of that. It goes through some interesting motions. Here's two adjacent ones. They come together. Most often they start to spiral around each other before coming together. This one is undergoing some rotation itself. And so we start with, I think I have 20 or so, not 56 here. But it goes something like that. And they get fatter each time because they're forming vortices, so they're kind of square shaped, or many people's liken these to animals. So when you look at many replications or petroglyphs or pictographs from antiquity, these will be drawn as animals because you can sort of see a tail or something you can imagine like that. And it goes down in number until you get to 4, and it ends at 4. So the 56 finally end at 4. Which is important. Now we've looked at this both with supercomputer simulations to determine that indeed 56 is the number, and 56 is the number as you make the cylinder thinner and thinner. The number of filaments goes up to 56, where each one has got an individual pinching magnetic field. If you go beyond that, the magnetic fields kind of come together, and and you don't get 128 or so, you get 56. This is a 17 kiloampere beam, intense relativistic charged particle beam that has, this is a steel witness plate that is some meters away from the device itself. The periodicity of, and I've outlined these marks so that you can see on the periodicity, again, is 56. This is work that has all been published. That's just plasma physics. Okay, so there are 56 Birkeland filaments in our intense aurora that happened perhaps 4 millennia ago. So, okay, so now we start searching for concentrics that have either 56 rays or dots. Here's one on the Navajo reservation in Arizona in the United States. We start going around the world. Next one, we go to Australia. This is near Derby, Australia. This is in the Wingina Gorge. And again, it has 56 rays coming out. On top of this is another a larger 56 rayed petroglyph, but it has blobs or dots on the end. And one finds that number all over. Now these are, here is Derby, Australia. Here is Winslow, Arizona. And you take the two, and if you tilt the Australian one by about 45.3 degrees, you can overlay it. It's very hard to overlay it. It's very hard to overlay it to distinguish one from the other because they are so precise. In fact, to do so, I had to emboss the Arizona one and then put down the Australian one in black just to differentiate the two. They're so exact, yet they're that far apart, which is typical. These occur by the hundreds around the world, and there's many more than that. 56 filament dot concentrics. Oh, okay. So we've got a huge data bank on a supercomputer. And the idea then is to go through and find every 56 point symmetric concentric, that exists if we can. And this one is what's called the 4 o'clock rapids, 56 concentric. Actually, it's less than that, because these have started to undergo rotation. They have started to, as Birkeland filaments, they have started to rotate around each other. You can see the rays coming out there. And so on the computer, what we will do is generate blind rings. That is, I will draw a ring through each of the major features on this Columbia River petroglyph, and now I'm going to go through and ask the computer to compare this to all sorts of concentrics that I have, maybe brass plates, and maybe other items from antiquity. It can be, well, we collect items from antiquity and include that also. I'm trying to think what else we include. We include a great many things, not just petroglyphs. And so that's what we're trying to match, or 56, some sort of 56 symmetry. The first one we come up with is only 17 miles away from the blind ring one. So I mean, that's so you might say, well, the same artist just moved downstream and chipped away, except there are differences in this. That they both like 56 for some reason. The next one is in Arizona. This is again on the Navajo Nation, and one sees the 56 rays coming out and the match of the blind rings that we search. This again is from Washington State. This is a pictograph. Again, it matches the feature. It has less than 56, but the concentric blind rings picked it up. Bronze Shield, 3rd millennium, Middle East. Again, it picked this one up. This is a 56 ray from Kazakhstan. It's 56 rays. It doesn't have the inner concentric rings. Okay, somebody locked the doors because at this point people are going to start escaping. But this is a 56 ray circle axis mundi from China, and these are actually drawn as paintbrushes. You have the axis mundi here, the tree coming up in the center. But anyway, the 56 are there. This one I've forgotten where it is, but again it has the 56 rays. That one again is in Arizona. Says same thing. Pick that one up. This is unfair. I picked the penumbra of a dense plasma focus, which also has 56, but it's a plasma, so we would expect it to have 56, and it does. Dome ceiling, 5th Street Church, Seattle. This is very close to the Forbidden City of China ceiling picture. These ceiling pictures show up, and they generally have 56 periodicity around the side. So if people remembered this, and it's sacrosanct, and they continue to use it over and over again. This is brand new. This is the Grand Atrium in Saudi Arabia, which is brand new. And again, they didn't draw it circular, but they certainly put 8x7 panels of light around here, as well as some structure in the center. Again, carrying it on. The Aborigines today will produce pictures that might as well have been drawn, might as well be petroglyphs that are 4,000 years old, and they'll do it today. That's how accurate it is. That's Neolithic stone ruins. This is the Cannella Village, north central Brazil. Has very interesting. They have these 56 avenues coming out, and a house, a village house, on each side. Like that. Anybody want to look at that Neolithic stone ruins again?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay. So
exactly. The 56 Aubrey house.
Excuse me?
The 56 Aubrey house in Stonehenge.
Yeah, it's Aubrey. Yeah.
Aubrey.
Aubrey. Yeah. Okay. Now you have to pronounce it right. I have to use English here. Okay, so this is what it looks like today, or whenever they took the picture. Actually, I visited the place before they put the fence around. I'm going to go back there. Okay, finish this thing up. Which is a nice. It's not the biggest. It's not the most accurate, but it's nice. Okay. So what we're going to do is, first off, we're going to accept the accepted reconstruction of Stonehenge, as it is believed, it's thought. We're not going to put in extra stones or whatever. Where they were, and simply use it, and then overlay it on the. This is overlaid on the Navajo petroglyph, and one can see the sort of matchup that ones have, and do this with several hundred of these. So this configuration was seen around the world.
How long was it seen for? People to be able to count that there were 56. It must have been seen for a long time, so that they
millennia. Yeah, I think their number. Their dating is the English Heritage Foundation. They use something like 14 deer antlers, carbon 14 dating, and deer antlers are.
Not Stonehenge, but how long was this object seen in the sky? So people were able to count
as far as I can tell, about a millennia. About a millennia to go from 56 to 4.
I see. And they were able to count that there were 56.
They had. Oh yeah. They had good telescopes or good eyesight because they were able to see it, and do a very good job based on what everybody else drew too. Not drew and constructed in any number of ways, many ways, far beyond the 100 that I'm talking about here. Ways of reproducing what they saw in the sky. This is an overlay on the Forecroc Rapids petroglyph. Here we can start to see the rotation of the Birkeland filaments that is not shown in Stonehenge, but nevertheless the overlay is quite well, and you start to see, which is what we see in the laboratory. We start to see these go off, and as I showed in that one picture, they go off until eventually they come down to 4. So how does a 56 filament Z pinch evolve? I think I probably already showed you this. Okay, and now I'm trying to explain each and every one of the petroglyphs that I showed you on that panel that looked like garbage when I started. Okay, but I haven't shown you all the petroglyphs that are on the panel or elsewhere. Okay, and here we have petroglyphs that look like this. I mean, the people either have to be mad. Actually, you can see the origins of the American Indian headdresses and other headdresses drawn around the world in the petroglyphs. So where did these come from? Well, as this intense aurora comes in, again, it goes through these pinches, and you get several of these plasmoids out there as it funnels in, and then you have these 56 filaments coming around. And what gave them the idea? Oh, well, first, okay, I have to say something about auroras. And the reason I have to say something about auroras is because I've edited 6 or 7 journals on magnetospheric physics, so I can talk about auroras. There's other things that some of you know about that I don't think I'll ever be able to publish. But anyway, here's the Earth down here. Here's the what is pictured to be today's plasma coming in from a solar storm on both the south and north poles. Now we know this one came in only on the south, but anyway, it forms these plasmoids. So if you're into auroras, that's important. If you're into something else, that's important too. And so we will draw a picture of this aurora, of the aurora cone being pinched and coming in, and one starts to get an idea of what the people were up to when they were drawing figures like that, and why it is double rayed like that. It's always double rayed, and sometimes with dots, but it usually has this double ray structure. And so we're looking back up at the morphology of this intense aurora, and I think that these are 56 filaments. Again, they've reduced now to 28, and they're going to come down to 4. Okay, what other evidence is there to support this? This is something that was just pointed out to me. This is a very bad picture. This is a vessel of ore, which is currently on display at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, that is helping to support this work. And very poor picture. They've promised me a better picture, but it didn't come in time. And Ur is in the Middle East, and this is thought to be 3rd millennia sort of vessel from the excavations, the archaeological excavations. Down here, you can't see it very well, is an 8-petal design, which really gives it away. I'm not going to show you an 8-petal design because I wasn't smart enough to go from the 56 down to eventually down to the 8, down to the 4. I started with 56, and then I left out stuff, and then I started again with a lesser number. But I can go back to 8 pretty simply. Okay, and the final morphology for a 56 Birkeland filament cylinder is the 4 shown here. Here's the 4 remaining Birkeland currents. These are the magnetic fields, the synchrotron emitting magnetic fields around the outside of each one of these. These are at two different times here. And so what are the petroglyphs that match this? Well, Mesoamerica has got the large, this incidentally is called a kinkun. Okay. And this is the most reproduced petroglyph in Mesoamerica, although you find it everywhere. The museum has got some very good examples from the East and the Middle East, Mediterranean countries. There's also some, I photographed myself, some very good ones in Valcamonica, as well as Arizona, New Mexico, and so on. And so one has got this is trapped plasma that is being heated up by these currents pushing in, being heated up, very bright, as are these very bright here. And then in this configuration here again shows up. This is the final configuration. At this point, the plasma snaps and it's gone. That's it. So I hope that, I think that's my last one. Conclusions. Okay, petroglyphs not only carry the orientation of an intense synchrotron light emitting column coming into the Earth's south magnetic pole in prehistory, and again dating is very, very hard, perhaps 4 millennia ago, I'm not sure, but also the complete temporal evolution graphically. In other words, one can take these petroglyphs of one type, put them all together and make a movie of the evolution, just as one does with the supercomputer simulation. That's what's contained in it. Also the orientation and the petroglyph, as you look at it from different angles of inclination, give you the figure of what was in the sky. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, Brian.
I just wondered, Tony, what was Thomas Gould's basis for suggesting there had been an intense aurora thousands of years ago?
Oh, what was Tommy Gould's? I don't know. I don't know. I've got the paper, but I really don't know the answer to that question. What was the genesis of why they think, and not just Tommy Gould, but several others, and not just in astrophysics, but in physics. There's other evidence that supports this scenario that I need to look at.
I'm suggesting that the Stonehenge arrangement really has nothing to do with the moon and things like that.
No.
It's simply
No. I mean, you know, that's the popular. You're starting with 56, and it's easy to get to 28, and then the lunar cycle, and so on. So I mean, so if you look at just Stonehenge and say what is it, without knowledge of the several million of other things around the world, then yeah, you can turn it into a clock, you can turn it into a calendar, you can turn it into whatever. You know, certain things, the heel stone, you know, it's about 4 degrees off, which, I mean, that's pretty good, but there should be one on the other side. There's not. There's a number of things that have kind of been fudged by the archaeological group. They've done that in Utah. There's some concentrics in Utah, and they've kind of fudged the angles a little bit, but they're very, very isolated. And why would you hew out and carry 75 miles, 45 ton or 75 and 45 for Stonehenge, Avebury 75 ton rocks, just to tell you when the winter solstice was. I mean, that's an enormous, and to dig the barrels around, enormous amount of work, and not just there, but around the world. At one time, there was enormous amount of work went in at one particular time, over a millennia, around the world. I have tried to make petroglyphs twice. I can't do it. I don't have the time, I don't have the patience, the sun is hot, and you're making noise. You just can't do it. Yet they chip these things, 4 centimeters deep in places. So like Stonehenge, what would drive you to use your gross national product to produce these items? And it's not just Stonehenge, it's many items around the world that just happened to overlay on Stonehenge. So I think Wall probably gave you a very good clue. He drew that body in the background with the lightning coming down. That lightning is lethal. It's gigaamperes of lightning coming down. We know from laboratory experiments that intense amounts of X-rays, which are lethal, are produced for tens of kilometers around the lightning bolts, and then for 100 kilometers, sores will develop on the skin. I suppose, and what else can you do, but to draw pictures of maybe the gods or whatever to make it go away. The petroglyphs on the cliffs, for example, you can't see from the bottom. You can only see from the top, which is why you have to have somebody at the top, somebody at the bottom, and like that. And they're not made for man for your neighbors to look at. They're made for somebody in the sky.
They're far away from human habitation, from what I've seen. They're far away from the nearest village.
Yeah.
Welcome Monica, you've got
Oh.
to climb and climb.
Oh, Another myth is, you need to be near Pueblo, you need to be near water. No, absolutely not. You only have to have very good granite that has at least one component of magnetic south and some kind of blinder. And they went to enormous lengths, enormous amounts of work, because these are in very remote areas. The most prodigious number of petroglyphs probably in the United States, the states of Nevada and Utah, for the most part uninhabitable. I've logged out there when it's 106 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever that is in centigrade, whatever you use. I think divide by pi again or something. And you're photographing, photograph on digital and on CDs, and so I can take a lot, and drinking water. It's just terribly hot, terribly inhospitable. Now the weather may not have been like that 4 millennia ago. Probably wasn't. But what caused man to carve centimeters deep? Oh, and then some, yes, some you can only get through from ropes and so on. I mean, they put their lives at stake to do that. Some are hundreds of feet up. You're up there and hanging on, and you're looking down, 100 feet or 200 feet or so. So what drove man to do that? And I think Walt's picture gave you a pretty good idea. These lightning bolts were striking Earth, and people were either being killed by the X-rays, incinerated, vitrified, or covered, or made very sick.
Are you saying that the lightning bolts happened at the same time as the Aurora?
Yeah, because there's one thing in common with petroglyphs around the world, is they have the torosity symbols, the lightning bolt symbols, next to them. And you'll see a figure, and then it will have a jagged lightning bolt going over to another figure, and so on. That's universal. And the only thing that I know of that has a torosity like that is a intense electrical discharge, either in the laboratory or in the sky.
I'm just wondering how they would have seen it in the northern hemisphere, given the arc of the Earth, and given that auroras are not very high.
So that the Earth would interfere with the
this is a very intense aurora, and I believe it went out something like 170,000 kilometers, and I'm not sure about that distance. It went a ways out there, because and that is the reason for logging the world and also getting inclination, because where was it? And the fact that the one jhana that overlays the Navajo is tilted at 45 degrees, that gives you some indication of where it is. But it's not just that. I mean, we've got several hundred examples that
So have you pinpointed a spot?
No, I need more data, especially from the far south, because we have pinpointed the lower part, but some of the interesting structure is way out there, and that's data that we're gathering right now and processing.
It's like looking for the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, it's like looking at the end of the rainbow. Yeah, except this is that's
exactly
a good.
where it was over.
That's
been a place where it was through.
Yeah, there's a tendency from South American data and also from Australian data that it went out south and then it bends up to the east. But it was clearly, it's clearly seen as symmetrical from Stonehenge. Other places at latitudes between 56 degrees and about the same. No, I don't know the same south, because I've only got 33 degrees to the south, and it's tilted there. But anyway, northern South America, I have pretty. China, Thailand, Burma, China. All of these places.
China was empty on your map. I noticed that.
No. Well, I'm looking for empty places, because that will tell me, like if there is some delineation mark, some mark at let's say 60 degrees latitude north, and then something south, that helps to tell me the field of view. Now, since, okay, this took no great Euclid to figure out because I'd already seen this in the laboratory. Okay, so, all I got to do is, I've seen it in the laboratory, so now I see the petroglyphs. So I match it to the ones in the laboratory, and I can see where it's off angle. And then that off angle then gives me an idea of what they were looking at where. And then this allows you to produce it. It's kind of like a hologram, where you have a bunch of pixels and you're able to get a 3D image if you have enough pixels. It's very close to that. So it's a matter of getting enough pixels to resolve what they actually saw.
Yes. The fact that the petroglyphs in the British Isles are dominated by the spirals and the eyes.
Yeah.
You don't see any stick men.
No, you don't see any stick men, which is the lower, yes. Yeah, further down. And it's just, the number of stick men is just enormous, at least at lower latitudes. But in the British Isles, Argyll and some of the places like that, you don't find any. You don't find any. No stick men whatsoever. I've got several books on the British Isles of various petroglyphs, and Ian has contributed immensely by providing actual GPS locations for some of these, and so far they're indicating southern magnetic south view.
Most of the myths seem to be pointing towards seeing something in the north.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. Now mythology is it's very accurate. It's now, how do I know it's very accurate? Because I'm not a mythologist. Well, okay, so they tell these stories around the world of what followed what. Yeah, this is the way it goes in the laboratory. This goes first, then this goes first, and then this goes first, and so on. And yeah, that's what happens. So I know the mythology is very accurate, but there is this. We saw it in the north over and over again. We saw it in the north. We saw it in the north. And now some of the mythologists that are in the group, maybe you know or has talked here, Rens Vandersloos, claims that the north was either celestial north or straight up. Straight up might be north. And to my thinking, right now it looks like it might be straight up, not the North Pole as we know it today. Because none of the petroglyphs, have any crevices. You hear the rattling behind you in the crevice, and you're looking out straight magnetic south. It's not, and you can't see north, or you're up against a cliff that goes way up there, 100 meters up, and you can't see north, but you can't see south. So yeah, that's one of the puzzles. That's one of the puzzles. What is north? And Rens went into this in some detail that it's probably up, which makes a lot of sense. And I haven't shown you the eclipsed part of the concentrics, which are seen in large numbers to the north, where only half of it was seen. The same thing is true in Australia, which gives some idea that they couldn't see the whole thing. Now, they certainly could at Stonehenge, but further north. Anyway, that's all. This is work in progress.
Okay.
Is this work published or is it usually published?
Yeah, this is all being published. And again, as I said, it's being published under the auspices of the field that I work in, high energy density plasma physics. So it's appearing in the physics and engineering journals like that, as is the Stonehenge. No, through the museum we do have an article coming out in the journal, the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. So the archaeology, all fields of human endeavor that are somewhat soft, including archaeology, people have very hardened ideas, especially if they've worked in the field for 50 years and published 300 papers, and you come along with something entirely new, and this is new, and they generally don't like it.
But they do publish it.
They what?
They do publish it. That's amazing.
Well, yeah.
There have been cases of people who've been ostracized because
Science is politics. Science is politics, and everybody clings around the money tree of funding, or at least in the United States. I'm sure elsewhere where the federal government pours the money, that's where people, and that's where the referees are going to allow you to continue on. If you present an idea away from this money tree, I mean, your chances, your citation index is going to go down, your funding is going to go down, and whatever. So you have to work around that. You have to find ways to work around that. And since I'm working in a national laboratory and high energy density plasma physics, thermonuclear physics, there's certain things that I can. So certainly, I'm encouraged to publish on astrophysics, not on what I may actually work on, but on astrophysics, which has the same energy density. So there's ways around. It's hard, but.
Okay, gentleman with the moustache.
I worked as a radar fitter in the Air Force, and I noticed there's this property that you have, current flows at 90 degrees to a voltage field within a waveguide in radar sets.
Yeah.
And when I first saw pinching, the Z pinch, now is there a relationship between our man-made plasma energy and the natural one?
No, the Z pinch, high power microwaves also happens to be one of the fields that I have worked on. And so so the first thing, are these the various electric field and magnetic field patterns that you get in a TM01 waveguide or something like that? No, they're not. A Z pinch has got an anode and a cathode usually, and a capacitor bank that is driving it. In our case, we have about a 3 centimeter long target, which will be wires or gas or a foil. And then all of the current is dumped into that, and then the Z pinch, then the material then melts, vaporizes, goes through various phase changes, and then it's fully stripped, fully ionized, so that you have a plasma, and then it pinches, and that's what we photograph. And we take what's called time frame photographs, so we can watch the evolution in time over a certain amount of time. So it's nothing to do with microwaves, except you cannot have an intense charged particle beams without producing microwaves. So, that's it. Yes?
The African dances that were going on there with the big poles.
Yeah.
There's no link with the Ashtoreth poles and so on from the Jewish history, and they were worshipping the planets and so on.
They're called either Ciggy or Ciggy headdresses. There's 3 very good ones at the University of Pennsylvania right now that I'm waiting for photographs. I saw them, and they're actually better than the ones that were in that picture. Now, you said something with regards to Jewish religion?
Going back to the Hebrew time, yeah.
Yeah. The fact that the name of it is, I forget. Okay, typically have a pattern of 6 or 4. That is just preceding a kinkun or a kinkun, and then that's very meaningful. It indicates a later point in time to me. I don't know exactly what time. And then you ask the mythologists. I mean, you really want to know. I know the relative time between the evolution of each of these instabilities. I know that from the laboratory and the plasma scales, as I said, 14 order of magnitude. So I can get the relative time. I don't know the exact time of the event. So the mythologists, and so I asked, okay, Moses, take Moses. Okay, he talked to Pharaoh. Now that's a time point. Who is Pharaoh? Nobody will tell me because nobody knows. It's just Pharaoh. There's no name attached to it. So it's these sort of things that you look for in mythology. You look for hints of dates because you want to know the date. Is it 4,000 years old? Sometimes when I get out and I'm out in the field, and they could be 8,000 years old. And some are concentric with 56, might be chiseled with 4 centimeter deep holes, and half of them are worn away in time. The other half were shielded, and they're still 4 centimeters deep. They might have been deeper. So are they 8,000 years old? I don't know.
And on that note concerning time, I'm afraid we must draw to a close. So could I call upon everyone here to thank Tony very warmly for this very interesting talk.